Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to At Your Service. This is a weekly live stream where I interview people who are seasoned and own a service-based business. I have a very good friend with me. His name is Tim Klimple. Tim, welcome.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Happy to be chatting with you. Why don't you give us a quick overview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Tim Klimple. I own the law firm Klimple Benefits Law. I've practiced in employee benefits and executive compensation for about 14 years. And I recently decided to spin off and start my own shop based on my experience and the clients that I've worked with. And I've really enjoyed having the chance to do it. It's given me great amount of flexibility to pursue the kind of professional practice that I want to, and that I've really developed in my own way over time. And so I've really enjoyed the short opportunity it's been so far to continue doing what I've done in traditional larger law firms now on my own.
Nice, nice. That's awesome, Tim. And obviously, within the field of law, you have many types of law that you can practice. So, what are a few of the main areas of law that you specifically focus on?
Sure. So for those familiar with the different lanes and sort of sub practices of employment and corporate law, I'm an ERISA lawyer. So I have practiced for 14 years in the federal law that regulates employee benefit plans,
Nice.
including 401k plans, other retirement plans like pensions, group health plans, wellness programs, all of the kind of voluntary benefits that HR departments are associated with administering, on a company-wide basis, as
Sure.
well as executive compensation for key level employees, whether they're owner employees or C-suite employees or other just senior level professionals.
That's awesome, Tim. And what kind of made you want to pursue a career as an attorney?
Great question, of course. I went to college pretty evenly split between my love for journalism and reporting and writing
Oh, nice.
and and the law. Uh,
Yeah.
I enjoyed both of them pretty much equally.
Hmm.
And on one hand, there's overlap, I think, in writing between law and journalism.
For sure.
On the other hand, there's a more linear approach to taking legal authority, as it exists, and
Hmm.
having to work with clients in that reality and to help them achieve their goals, which is a very different set of tasks than you have in the case of like print reporting, which is what I studied in college, where writing is still key and effective communication is as vital in journalism as is in anywhere I can think of,
Yeah.
um, but provides, I think, a little more leniency in terms of what it is that you want to identify as the most important thing is to communicate, um, which is interesting saying that now because when I went into college and was unsure between those two disciplines, I actually
Hmm.
thought of law as a more sort of flexible a career with more autonomy to sort of
Right.
think on your own, which is very critical in law. But I thought of law and sort of government and policy is kind of all coming together, as I think a
Right.
lot of law students do.
For
But
sure.
when you're practicing in private practice, it's really about taking whether it's contract law or other existing authority and working with that to represent clients. And in journalism, you're covering what is deemed necessary by a news organization to cover. But you do have the ability to, I think, write a little bit more outside the box in terms of identifying precisely what there is that you've got to write about, what you do in law. So I like both of those. In the end, back when I was in college, I decided that law was my most strong skill set, and
Hmm.
that I had a passion for representing clients in the context of law.
For sure, for sure. No, that's pretty incredible, Tim. I had no clue that you went to school for journalism. It's really cool. It's very, very
Yes,
cool.
yes. Syracuse University, Orange, and it was a great experience, and I still love it.
That's awesome, Tim. Yeah. Um, yeah, I've been to Syracuse once. Very cold because I went in December. But wanted to ask you, what about being an attorney do you enjoy? Like, what aspects of your business do you really enjoy?
Yeah, I like working through situations to resolution,
Yeah.
and you know, getting to that point where you have an initial outreach from a client, and maybe it's a set of documents that they need, but in reality, it's much more than that. It's a goal, it's a business goal, or it's
Right.
an employment goal. It's something that involves their livelihood, whether it's as an individual employee or as a business owner, or a succession plan. And um, just step by step going through that process. And even though it's a lot of reading and writing, it's also a lot of speaking. And especially when you get the opportunity, whether it's within a larger firm or on your own, to be counseling clients directly, it's really rewarding to be able to do that. And so to bring things all the way through to resolution, whether it takes a week or sometimes much longer, that's always what I enjoy the most.
For sure.
Part of what I do is M&A and transactions, so plugging into deal teams and providing the employee benefits support and transactions. So when a deal closes, that's the greatest example I can think of is,
Right.
100 million, $500 million
Yeah.
transaction. And then one day, the wires are made, and that's it. Life goes on. The buyers bought their assets or business that they wanted, and the seller has cashed out. And there are other things, of course, that follow to tie up ends. But when a deal closes, it's, I think, a very good feeling for usually everyone involved.
For sure. Yeah. No, it's I think when you're able to figure out challenges and when, you finally cross over the finish line, it's very, very gratifying. And, speaking of challenges, I guess what what was a challenge that you faced early on, either when you first started your career as an attorney or when you first launched your own law firm? What was a challenge that you had faced?
Yeah, I think about two time periods. One, I would say, would be a transition in thinking from being a young lawyer, just practicing law
Mhm.
and doing legal work as a sort of law school graduate would, to
Mhm.
begin to think more like a part of a business in the
Mhm.
case of private practice, right?
Right.
There are thousands of government attorneys, nonprofits who have a different mission, and those are wonderful things. I come from more of a corporate uh, practice in what
Mhm.
I do, or employment in the case of individual employee side representations. So and I've always worked in private practice in law firms. Now I'm having my own firm too. So yeah, at some point after a few years at work, you start to see how you're doing more than just doing legal work, and you're doing more than what your law school professors ask you to learn and to do, and how to write a great exam. You're
Right.
part of a business, and you're part of someone's blueprint for profitability.
Right.
And there many businesses, law firms included, are much more than a profit center,
Yeah.
but they are in the private sector,
Mhm.
and they are there, for profit, to produce revenue, and for everyone to earn a livelihood. So maturing as an attorney early on, from doing the legal work to seeing how does what I'm doing and spending my time doing, and the way I cultivate relationships with clients or prospective clients further that organization's business goals.
Right.
And that's not something that's covered in law school.
Yeah.
It's covered in business school. I don't have an MBA. I have a tax LLM, but it's not an MBA. It's not business oriented in
Yeah.
that way. But so that was kind of a pivot point for me, and so I would call that a challenge in that that's something that you're not taught really in law school. It's not to say that's never covered, but there's not necessarily that that meeting where you're going out into the world and you're joining a law firm for the first time, or even your first few years, where someone sits down and says to you, by the way, just so you understand, here's exactly how you fit into X, Y, and Z partners, plan for sort of shared success and livelihood, and this is we're in business together, and this is how you are successful. Lawyers hear constantly about billable hours, and that's a huge part of the current model.
Right.
In some cases is an open question, and has been in some ways has at different times, like during the Great Recession, that model had to be pulled back a little bit into kind of alternative fee arrangements, which is something that's talked about. But I guess the point just being, there's no sort of wise person there when you enter the business world to show you how you're part of something that's bigger than just doing the legal work. You're part of you're part of the business world, and so that was a process for me early on that I think I did manage well to grab onto once that became clear. But that was a realization that for me had to happen just sort of by osmosis, and seeing how things went around, where I was. The second, I think, challenge would be starting my own firm, and things that I've enjoyed, and things that I knew ahead of time would need to happen, because in being a business lawyer of some form, I knew some of the things ahead of time. But that first day of, not being on someone's payroll, and your equipment is the only equipment, and what you do with your time is your time. Like, as yourself, Brandon, as an owner, is the world's your oyster, but there's no one rolling out the red carpet for you. So for me, it was like, all right, I should probably upgrade and get a new laptop, and I need a bigger monitor for my office here. I run a virtual office because I'm fortunate that's trendy enough today that I can do that, to have a virtual office. But things like, is my printer hooked up, and have I filed my trade name certificate in my local town, which in Connecticut you do, to have a DBA, so that I'm more sensitive to this as a lawyer, but so that on my website I can say Clinical Benefits Law and not have to say Clinical Benefits Law PLLC all the time. So there's no one but me to do that stuff. Things like setting up a client trust account and making sure I know how those rules work as far as accounting for it. Those are things where there's no one looking over my shoulder telling me what to do. It's on me to do that, and so that comes with its own challenges. But I think as long as you're conscientious enough to do it, it for me, it's been less of a obstacle than maybe not even that I thought, but I think that is spoken about a lot in terms of opening your own practice.
Right. Yeah. No, you're spot on, Tim. When you're first starting out and when you have a new venture, there's nobody there to hold you accountable. You have to hold yourself accountable. And I think, for me, just trying to structure my days properly, and to, when to call people at the most efficient times during a day, and when, I should spend writing, maybe earlier on when I'm a bit more creative, and just, I think learning to structure your day and to be as, I would, I would also say, is to be as committed to your calendar as possible, and just to, really just try to be punctual and treat yourself as if you are an employee at a company, and to hold yourself to that same accountability, I think, is key as well.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Couldn't have said it any better. If you want to succeed in the however way you think of it, you've got to put in the time, and the organization is key. And I mean, you're right to put it that way too. That you've got to think of yourself as, you know, both sort of your own employee, and you're an employer with
Yeah,
with yourself as your main employee, or if you've got partners, then being a team together. But you've got to sort of see it that way. And for me, that's definitely been true. Over the summer, having kids home in the house too, that's something that throws a little bit of a wrinkle into things, and having
sure.
obligations, and wanting to go on vacation, those things, like those all become balancing acts that can throw a little bit of a wrench into a daily schedule. Certainly you can update it, by the week,
Of
but
course.
things like that do do present, as challenges. So I think the discipline to do what it is that you really want to set out to do, is, I think, certainly required, and I think that's why it's not for the faint of heart,
Right.
to be doing that. But I think once you've established your own confidence to go out and do what you're doing as a service owner, I think the sky's the limit for anyone. So I would encourage others to consider it, because I think there many people can do maybe what they haven't thought of previously as something that they could do. If they kind of follow the schedule and think of themselves as an employee to themselves, and an
Right.
employer themselves.
Absolutely, Tim. I think that you could also have a career as a motivational speaker, because that was very eloquently said. Um, that's awesome.
Thank you. I'll take it under advisement.
That's awesome, Tim. And wanted to also ask, so obviously, you know, um, the area of law, it's a pretty saturated field. How do you stand out from your competition?
Yeah, I think I have, if not a truly unique skill set, I think I have a
Mhm.
fairly unusual skill set, in that it's broad to encompass both the sort of, I think, narrow expert area of employee benefits,
Mhm.
that being RISA, and the federal law, including tax law, that regulates employee benefit plans, and a separate whole area of tax law that governs deferred compensation and other forms of executive compensation. Um, Doing that, and also having the employment law background, so that I can represent individuals on bread and butter employment matters, things that involve just counseling on, say, a separation package, or transition from one company to another, where they're putting side by side an employment agreement that's in front of them versus their existing agreement, and looking at what non-competes there might be, which is a huge subject right now, versus what's being put in front of them, what unvested equity they might be leaving behind versus what they might be getting, and
Right.
what documents that they probably haven't gotten, if they're this is for, I think, uh, executive type employees who are getting something beyond a salary, and an annual
Sure.
bonus. I mean, those things are important, but most individual employees who come to me, they're not looking for my advice on how much money they should ask for, for their annual salary and their bonus. Like, they've figured that out, and that's already done. Um, so more like things like, what else should they be thinking about, and sometimes sensitive considerations around competition and restrictive covenants. So I think what makes me somewhat unique, perhaps in this geographical area, is, I think, the ability to do both the technical federal law that governs employee benefits,
Mhm.
and also the sort of bread and butter employment. And I think to be able to bring the technical also into, I think, a personable, relatable communication with clients. I think putting all that together is something I like to think of as a skill set that I've developed over my years in practice, which is what I think gave me the initial thinking, is that I could go out and do something like this. And so far, that's held true.
Of course, Tim. Yeah, and very, very well stated as to what sets you apart. And I would also add that you are a fantastic connector of people, right? It's not just about networking, but if you have a big network and you're unable and you don't have you just don't think about connecting others within your network, then it's kind of useless just to have a big network. And I think that you've done a great job um, of connecting people as well. And, I can speak about it from firsthand experience. You've done an amazing job of introducing me to other people that are in your network as well. And I think that that's another amazing way to stand out, regardless of what space you're in as well.
Absolutely, and I have to return the compliment. And I think some of this I've even been reminded by cues from you, and how you do this, and that is providing extra value, even if it's not in exchange for a fee, you might be taking in that week or month. But the idea of, who do I know? Someone's asking me a question, they need help. It's not something that's strictly in my lane, so they're not going to be hiring me. But who do I know so that I can get them to the right place?
Right.
And maybe it's not, maybe it's another lawyer, maybe it's not. And we've done this a lot, but it's a tremendous, I think, value to add to others who come to you. And I think it's ultimately beneficial to those who are able to utilize their networks for that. But in the short run, it's just it feels good. It's helpful to contribute and to help people get to the right place, because so much of the business world now, and you just on the consumer side, it's fragmented, is compartmentalized and
Yeah.
decentralized and specialized to an enormous degree. So knowing when to say no, and
Right.
to use your network, to even if it's to find one person to get one more person out to that right place, for people, it's a great way to help make the world go round. And I think it reflects well on you as a professional doing it.
Of course, Tim.
But
Yeah, of course, of course. It's always important to provide value outside of what you do, and very, very, very well stated. Um, and also wanted to ask, related to your business, for you, who is an ideal client, and who is also a great referral partner for you?
yeah. Um, Great question. Of course, happy to take it. But in terms of scope, kind of like I've touched on, as far as individual representations, usually senior level employees. So if it's maybe a CEO or COO, someone else senior in a company who wants some employment advice,
Mhm.
and it may well segue into employee benefits, maybe beyond the 401k kind of normal type of benefit, and maybe more into something like stock options or participation in profits interest, or carried interest is a sort of fancy way of saying same thing. But a lot of individual clients come with these proposed awards or new employment agreements for basically skin in the game of a company that they're going to. And so helping them understand what they're getting, maybe where they are in terms of like a priority order, and
Mhm.
maybe what an investor in their new company needs to yield, within 3, 4, 5 years before they might actually participate in this sort of, golden parachute is one way to put it.
Right.
But oftentimes what those folks are looking for is, they could either stay where they are or go somewhere else and make the same salary. But what they're really interested in, and I've heard this time and time again, is participation in the company's results. And
Yeah.
so they want to know that they've got something that's well structured and in order, because there are just as many not well structured and sort of um, I think loosely structured or offered pieces of equity compensation that may not be as easy to pin down, when and if the time comes for them to have any kind of gain from that. So
Right.
so that's something important. And so those individual employees who are looking for those kinds of advice on those kinds of items, I think in their
Mhm.
employment package, those are good clients who I think I serve well. It also advise on the income tax side of that, like the timing of when they might have compensation that at least the tax law says that they have to recognize and declare,
Definitely.
um, which is also can be a subjective thing in the deferred compensation world. Um, and then on the qualified employee benefits side, again, I mean, HR departments. I do have some clients, even though I'm a solo practice at this point. I've got clients that are companies that I'm helping them on, an entire company-wide pension plan, or an employee benefits program. So for me, an ideal client is everything from, I think, that senior level employee that has a real need, to go out and hire a private attorney, to pay and advise them on what to do, maybe changes to negotiate for, that, all the way through to, again, just entire benefits programs. Those are things that I can do. So I would say probably a small to medium company, although I've worked with very large ones throughout my career, that
Right.
want someone to help it in. It could be any one or all of its benefits offerings. Maybe something like a deferred compensation plan that hasn't been dusted off in 10 or 12 years, and they want to re-examine how they're crediting interest, for their key people. Those are ideal clients for me.
For sure, Tim. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And yeah, I will certainly keep my ear to the ground. And obviously, anyone that's listening, if you know those types of people, Tim is an amazing professional. And I'm not just saying that, otherwise, I wouldn't have him on this live stream. So keep those people in mind. Um, Definitely. And two last questions, both are outside of what you do for work. So the first question, what is something that nobody knows about you?
Okay. I have some in mind that I don't know. I can't say that nobody knows, but I would say most people who I've worked with or might work with me wouldn't know. And that is, during my last year of law school, my best friend from college and I did a little project together. He went on to become a music video and then commercial filmmaker,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
in LA. So he and I were a little bored. So we did a pilot documentary on featuring some up and coming musicians in New York. And so we have a documentary that, it, yeah, some parts of it actually went to some places for real, but it otherwise did not lead to a series on HBO that I dreamed it might have made. But we did film and interview some artists in New York, like Kid Cudi,
Wow.
Ambient LTD, yeah, Chairlift, Rah Rah Riot. For those who know them, they actually have a Syracuse connection to me and to my
Nice.
best friend from college, so that was much easier lineup. But they're a great band. So we did like a full about 1 hour documentary that we spent about between 3 and 6 months at different points over the summer and winter, going out and filming and in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and we cut it and edited it. I didn't have a whole lot, I think, of real artistic contribution, because I'm a more linear and somewhat creative person. But we did the direction and decided where to shoot and sort of what to ask. And it was very interesting talking with Kid Cudi, because it was really kind of a year or so before he took off and became like the Sonic,
Wow.
character person that he is. And I asked him where he saw himself in a year from now, because you could tell his career was starting to pick up. And he said Man, wow. That's crazy to think about. Because I think we could all see that he was a rising star. So that was fun. I got to talk to him backstage before. I think it was a Pete Rock concert that he did
Wow.
an opening for. Yeah. So that's something that probably most people don't know about me, and is really not related to my job. But it was a fun thing to do in law school.
Tim, that is so cool. Like I had that's that's pretty awesome. That's really cool. It's very cool.
Well, Syracuse again is a cool place. A lot of
Mhm.
filmmakers, and most people I'd say aspire to graduate and then go to New York or LA after graduation. That at least that's how it was when I was there. So, my best buddy from there, Max, was no exception. He was also in the communication school, a Newhouse there, but he was a television, radio, film major, and a lot of those folks go on to be producers and to be in TV and other forms of media. So, and he has a very artistic eye, and so it worked well together in that way. So, I was just lucky to have a good friend who had the kind of talent and also eye for good music, which he also exposed me to. So I have to thank Max for that too. If you're listening out there, Max.
That is awesome, Tim. Do you still have a copy of of the
Documentary, the pilot. Yes, yes.
you really?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely want to take a look at that, Tim.
yeah. It's on a terabyte drive somewhere, and maybe at this point, on a Google Drive. But uh, back in the day, this is like more than 10 years ago. It was on a piece of hardware.
That's so cool. That is very, very cool, Tim.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. And the final question, what is one way that you like to give back?
Well, one of the things I like to the ways I like to give back, I'd say as a lawyer, and I try to really incorporate this as part of my practice. This is something kind of yesterday I did with a prospective client who, based on their needs, and they had a sort of urgent need for at least to kind of understand where they were in terms of, an employment situation. Um, Helping them see sort of what the big picture was and maybe what their options are, without telling them, like they need to hire me first.
Right.
So one of and that's helpful to me also, I think, as a practitioner, because it doesn't ultimately benefit me to, be cagey on really some basics, and
Right.
then just someone hire me, get a few $100 or $1,000, and then they get a no, from an employer or something like that, and then they kind of move on, and it's not really a satisfactory process for them. So one of the ways I like to help is, before I take on a representation, I like to, and I think everyone really has this obligation to make sure that it's something that it's appropriate and most likely more beneficial than not
Mhm.
for the person to hire an attorney.
Right.
But before you're engaged, I mean, once you're a lawyer to a client, you have a lawyer client relationship. You have an obligation ethically to represent their best interests.
Right.
Before you're hired as a lawyer, you're like any other business person, in the sense that you don't have to take on any particular engagement. And so for me, it's important that any new client or matter that I take on is one where I can articulate both to myself and to the prospective client how an engagement with me is more likely than not to be something beneficial for them, even if they don't ultimately get what it is that they might be looking for, and even if it ends up as a possibility that they're going to spend more money than they recover. At least they're going to get answers to something that they want answers to.
Mhm.
But having those conversations and analyzing, does this make sense for someone to hire me or anyone else in the first place? Because there are those times where there's this like middle ground, and the reality is, in our society, access to legal services is very uneven. It's expensive to
Right.
get, if you want to call it justice or what you might be legally entitled to. It's
Hmm.
expensive to get no matter where you are.
Right.
And so I'm cognizant of that. So sometimes just being able to serve as a little bit of a buffer for someone and soundboard as to like, here are kind of the general issues, and this is what the lay of the land might look like. And you might have a harder time just spending the money to have the possibility of getting what it is you're looking for. If it's like, I'm thinking of something like, if there's like if you're owed $25,000 for something, and even if it seems pretty clear on a document that's what you're entitled
Yeah.
to, but it's going to be like drawing blood from a stone to get it from someone. It's pretty hard to hire an attorney and feel confident, having done this as long as I have, that that person is going to, get that in a timely fashion and not have to necessarily weigh the decision to, do they have to file a lawsuit to get this?
Yeah.
Do they want to become a litigant in public court for this? And it's not ever my decision, but that's something that I take very seriously, and I don't take lightly the idea of just bringing people on and just saying, all right, like hire me, and then I'll kind of advise from there. And oftentimes, people, they understand that they need to know if something's going to make sense themselves, but to me, I consider that an obligation to help people work through that. Whether they're regardless of how much they're pushing for that, I think it's worth people understanding that there's going to be utility to doing this versus, maybe in this case, you might think twice about, based on everything that we're talking about, if sort of the game is going to be worth the candle. As a federal judge I once interned for wisely said. So I was like that saying.
Yeah. Yeah, Tim. Very, very, very well said. And, to your point too about, you know, um, the cost of hiring an attorney. I mean, I know it very well being in real estate investing. It's not just, well, for me, it's not just hiring a real estate attorney, but, when you're setting up a syndication, it's hiring a securities attorney, which is a lot more costly. So I've spent, um, like I like half of what I've spent on my business, or at least a solid portion, has been in legal fees, and it's certainly not cheap. Certainly not cheap.
Well, I apologize on behalf of the American Bar Association. Just kidding. I'm not authorized to apologize for them.
It's funny, Tim. Yeah, awesome. You have been an amazing guest. And one final question: where can people go to find out more about you if they want to reach out, if they need some legal help? How can they find you?
Sure. So my website is klimpl.law.com, and that's KLIMPL law.com.
Mhm.
You can also reach me by email at tklimpl@klimplaw.com.
Awesome, Tim. Awesome, Tim. And on LinkedIn as well, right?
And on LinkedIn, I'm there.
Of course, of course.
Find it. I think Timothy Klimpl is the way I go.
Nice. Awesome, Tim. Yeah, you've been an amazing guest, and really appreciate you hopping on today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and we should do it again. So
Yes,
always a pleasure chatting, Brendan. So really appreciate it.
absolutely.